What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so sometimes I like to let my imagination run wild and just talk about crazy things. Things that I think are really cool or really interesting. Things that would basically like capture my attention, or at the very least, is not just me running over a comic book story. And so I want to try something different here. I want to talk about a character, and I might turn this into a series, characters that are too powerful for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Like too powerful for Marvel movies. Because I've been thinking about this recently, and there's a lot of characters in Marvel Comics that are just broken, right? Like they're just insanely overpowered. This is going to be like a weird thing. In this one, I want to talk about Mad Jim Jaspers, all right? Because everybody knows I love Mad Jim Jaspers. I love the character, and honestly, I'm not really shooting for views. I'm just shooting for like characters that I think that I want to talk about here. So Jim Jaspers was, dude, he was so broken. I mean, he was so broken. Okay, so what you had in Marvel Comics back in the day is you had something called the Omniversal Development Court, and you still have it to this day. It ran all the way up to the Incursions. So the way this worked is in Marvel Comics, you've got like a multifaceted system when it comes to the multiverse. On the surface, what you see are like multiple universes, right? And that seems like that's it. Like there's all these different universes. You know, you have the main Marvel universe, which is called Earth 616, and then you have like all these other universes that are out there. The Ultimate Universe, a universe where Deadpool gets the Venom symbiote, a universe where Spider-Man never gets rid of the Venom suit, a universe where Jean Grey becomes the Phoenix and kills everyone. I mean, you have like all these different various universes out there. And so from there, it starts breaking down into kind of like a hierarchy and a system of management is how that works. You have, for example, the custodian of the multiverse, a being that exists to make sure the multiverse doesn't collapse in on itself. You've got the living tribunal, which is a judge of the multiverse to make sure that like magical energies, the various, mystical energies that exist are not imbalanced. So like there's not like two Doctor Stranges in a particular universe or something along those lines. And then from there, you have what's called the Omniversal Development Court. And the Omniversal Development Court exists for the purpose of monitoring every single universe in the multiverse and saying, okay, at this point along the line, mutants should rise to power, or should like begin, manifesting their powers. At this point along the line, a Captain America should exist. At this point along the line, there should be an Iron Man. There should be an Avengers team. It doesn't mean that like Captain America will be Steve Rogers. It doesn't mean that like Iron Man will be Tony Stark. It just means somewhere along the line, these various characters should begin popping up, which is why if you go and look at every single like what if story, alternate reality story, whatever the case may be, you will always see the superheroes that you know appearing in some form or fashion. Like in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, during the collapse of the multiverse, there was a point where the Illuminati, so like Reed Richards, Iron Man, Beast, Hank McCoy, and like Name of the Submariner and Black Panther, there was a point where like they started looking at these different universes. Like Jonathan Hickman started showing us these different universes that were being destroyed by the Incursions. And they had one called the Great Society, which was basically the DC universe inside the Marvel multiverse. And what you had was like this whole new era of superheroes, like Sun God, which was basically Superman. You had basically stand-ins for like Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, so on and so forth. And what ended up happening here is where none of the superheroes that you knew of, which is to say Wolverine, Captain America, Iron Man, where none of them were there, they were tied into it in the sense that like the Great Society rose to power because a massive cataclysm took place on Earth where all the superheroes were killed. Like all the Marvel superheroes were basically killed off. And I want to say it was like the Kree-Skrull War that led to like the deaths of them all. And that led to the rise of the Great Society. But they were still there. Like they were there in some form or fashion. That's why you always see that. And so what you have in the Omniversal Development Court is you have a woman by the name of Saturnine that in another universe, and I want to say it was Earth 238 is the numerical designation for it. There were no superheroes on Earth. Like Captain America, none of those guys. Mutants didn't rise to power. None of that stuff was there. Well, they were there, but they had all been killed off. But the Omniversal Development Court didn't know that. All they knew was that on this universe, on this Earth, in this universe, none of the superheroes exist, and there was no indication they ever did. And so the result was that they basically went to go kind of poke around. Now, around the same time that happened, a character by the name of Brian Braddock, also known as Captain Britain, had been sent by a guy named Merlin to go to this Earth and face off against the person who annihilated all those heroes. And so basically by two different measures, the Omniversal Development Court and Captain Britain responded to that universe at the same time. And what you ended up having, what you ended up finding out was there's a guy on that planet named Mad Jim Jaspers, or at least just Jim Jaspers, but he's called Mad Jim Jaspers. And he had the ability to control the fundamental forces of the universe itself. And so what he did is he basically created a being called the Fury. And the Fury was kind of like this robotic organism that had the ability to adapt to any power. And so if you were to like attack it with super strength, it would instantly instantly register what your power was and then adapt to it before you could attack. And it used that ability to annihilate every single superhero on the face of the planet. And when the question was asked of Jim Jaspers why he did that, he said, well, I just wanted to eliminate the competition, is all that was. Now, eventually Captain Britain faces off against that version of Jim Jaspers, who's like just really, really powerful. But when the Omniversal Development Court gets there, they're like, okay, there's no superheroes here whatsoever, and there's no indication they ever existed here. So we're going to initiate something called the push. And the push was basically the Omniversal Development Court saying, we're going to jumpstart the evolution of people. So like, we're going to fast track the rise of mutants. Basically, like, the genes exist because the Celestials put them there. They just don't seem to have manifested for some reason. So we're going to initiate the push and we're going to bring those genes out. Basically, like, mutant powers are going to start popping up everywhere. And Jim Jaspers took this as a threat. And the result was that he initiated something called the Jaspers Warp. And the Jaspers Warp was essentially like this energy that emanated off of Jim Jaspers himself that started distorting and warping everything around him. And at that point, it was like escaping a collapsing tunnel, right? It was like, we got to go. So like, everybody left, right? Like the Omniversal Development Court left, Saturnine left, Captain Britain left. They all bailed out as fast as they could, because what was happening was this Jaspers Warp was emanating all throughout the entirety of Earth and then spreading beyond Earth into the solar system and then into the rest of the galaxy and then into the universe, and was going to spill out into the multiverse. And so this was a guy who had the ability to basically distort the entirety of the multiverse itself. Now, because of the fact that Saturnine was believed to have been a failure, because of the fact that Captain Britain was yanked back by Merlin, what this meant was that the Earth 238 universe was annihilated in its entirety. It was totally destroyed by the Omniversal Development Court, completely and totally wiped clean. And so it was just this giant empty void that had never really existed in the first place, is kind of how it was treated. And so from there, Captain Britain is sent back to his main Earth, and then he's told by Merlin, this was a test. This was to see how you would prepare or how you would be able to cope with someone like Jim Jaspers. And the question from Captain Britain is why? And Merlin said, because your Earth has a Jim Jaspers of its own, and he's more powerful than that one. And so like, Captain Britain has to go and face off against the main Marvel universe of Jim Jaspers. And that's when you end up seeing just how powerful his character really is. So there comes a point when Captain Britain travels to wherever it is that the Prime Minister of England resides at, because that's like Jim Jaspers is the Prime Minister at the time. There's a point where Captain Britain travels to wherever the Prime Minister is, and to his office basically. And as soon as he opens the door and walks in, where you would expect it to be an office, it's just like this endless void of empty space. And Jim Jaspers is just like this massive being that probably stands 5,000 feet tall, who's just sitting in a chair and just starts toying with Captain Britain. Like, he snaps his fingers and Captain Britain's like a little kid in a classroom. And then he snaps his fingers and he's doing something else. Like, he's so hopelessly outmatched. Like, just with a snap of his fingers, the entire universal space within that office is expanded to an exponential rate and then like, manipulated into being any number of things. And it's just an insane amount of power. Like that kind of person is like God level power. And so ultimately, like, there's not even Captain Britain who wins. What you end up finding out is that when the original 238 universe was destroyed, the Fury survived because it adapted to the destruction of its own universe. And then the Fury basically picks up on Jim Jaspers because his powers are so extreme, the use of his abilities are sending like shockwaves into the multiverse. People in other universes are feeling the effects of what he's doing. Not in the sense that like their world is being destroyed, but in the sense that like those who are attuned enough can pick up on the energy signature of a guy like on the other side of the multiverse, which is just how powerful he was. And so the Fury hones in on that signal and then travels directly to Jim Jaspers and starts adapting to his powers. And so like in this battle between Jim Jaspers and the Fury, the entire basis of the universe itself starts getting reworked and rearranged and twisted and manipulated and distorted through like all forms of madness. And then eventually the Fury realizes the only way to defeat Jim Jaspers is to move him away, because what Jaspers does is he doesn't actually like create things, right? He can't create fire. All he can do is manipulate fire. So he's just controlling the universe. He's not creating a universe, which is one of the big differences between someone like Jim Jaspers and like Matthew Malloy or like Franklin Richards or something like that. And so the Fury takes Jim Jaspers and teleports him to the void that was Earth 238, and there's nothing for him to manipulate, and then in turn incinerates Jim Jaspers, and that's the end of him. It's kind of a caveat. It's kind of a way to just sort of end the story, and it worked for what it was. But like, you're talking about it being this insanely powerful. I mean, Jim Jaspers against like Thanos in the Infinity Gauntlet, if it was Earth 238 Jim Jaspers, probably not. If it's the Earth 616 Jim Jaspers, I would say probably so. The only way that I think Thanos could win would be because he controls the time stone, and like Jim Jaspers cannot control time. He can't like send people back and forth through time. And even then, like Jim Jaspers is controlling the forces of the universe, but so is Thanos. Thanos can't create a universe using the Infinity Gauntlet. So their powers seem to be equal in that regard. I don't know. That's off the top of my head. I could probably do some like hardcore research and do some poking around and like do a compare and contrast and like break it down, but I'm not going to. And so like because of that, like it's a really cool thing. James Jaspers is just way too powerful for the Marvel Cinematic Universe because there's no one there. There's no conceivable means of defeating him, right? Like there's no conceivable way of defeating someone like that with powers that extreme because the guy was basically a walking, talking god. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. I'm kind of curious. Like, give me some characters that you think are just like too powerful to appear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and like Marvel movies. I'm really curious to see what you guys come up with because to me it's a cool idea. Anyway, if you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.